Today we're going to do an India ink value study. This is one of the things that I like to do for two reasons. Sometimes I use it as a way to prepare for a painting, and sometimes I have it actually right in the process of painting. I have an old scrap piece of heavy watercolor paper. You might see a few fingerprints, maybe even a footprint some here, but I'm going to be covering up with lots of ink, so I'm not too worried about that. I did this sketch based on a scene from my neighbor's farm in Vermont. So there's this big old tree that kind of looks down at some fields. In the background, we have the Green Mountains in Vermont. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the smaller brushes and sort of just sketch out on top of my graphite with ink straight, and then I'm going to put in some values with my ink. So here's a long-handled nylon brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in my tree. Now the light was mainly coming from behind, so my tree is going to be mostly in silhouette. It's going to be pretty dark. And when you're drawing with ink, you just sort of take a deep breath and not stress too much about it. If you make a little mistake, just sort of try to work it into your drawing. This is heavy 300-pound watercolor paper, and it can take lots of layers and lots of scrubbing, and you can do a lot to it. So I sketched lightly with pencil first, but you don't have to. You can go right in with the ink. We've got some trees in the middle ground here. And then I'm going to put there's the field here with the mountains in the background. So I'm going to do sort of a couple of strokes for that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is switch to a slightly wider brush. Let's see what we've got here. And I'm going to fill in some of the darks for the tree. As I mentioned, the tree is going to be in silhouette, so I'm going to make the tree pretty dark. That'll be my darkest dark, basically. I have a paper towel handy in case anything drips on me. At the top of this hill here, there's a nice little bench where you can sort of sit by this tree and enjoy the view. And these are the people that I buy my maple syrup from. So they have a farm that does all sorts of things: Christmas trees, maple syrups, pumpkins, corn. And they are in their 4th generation of running this farm. The youngest member is an engineer, and he decided to leave his job at IBM and join the family farm and take it on for another generation. Okay, so I've got this great big shadow that the tree is casting, and I'm going to add a little bit more water. You can see the texture of my paper. This is a cold press paper. I'm going to take advantage of the texture sometimes with the ink. Got a cluster of big trees behind this main tree, and they're not quite as dark, but they're still fairly dark. So we'll put those in. And we can put these guys in. These are kind of a row of mostly pine trees. And I'm using a flat brush. The flat brush allows me to get all sorts of different strokes. Now I'm going to switch to a big brush, really nice big fat brush here, and this will let me get in some of my lighter washes. So I've got some, this is the grass right near the viewer, so I might want to put a few strokes that indicate that it's grassy up here. Now, in the middle ground, we've got some farmers' fields, so we can just put some quick indications of those fields. We'll just let that dry for a second. The distant green mountains are going to be pretty light, so you'll see I really thin my ink out a lot on the paper here. I just want to put a little bit of pigment there, but not much. Darken these guys up a little bit back here in this corner. That'll sort of anchor this side. I'm going to get my biggest brush that I have out here, which is this one, and I'm just going to do some sweeping, very, very light shades in the sky. Just add some movement here. I'm going to suggest a little bit of foliage in the big tree. And a row of slightly darker hills in the middle ground. And there we have it. Now we have a little sketch study for a painting. Thanks for joining me. I'm Sean Dye. You can see more of my artwork at SeanDyeStudio.com, and you can see more free art lessons at jerrysartoriema.com.